The fourth question. Question. He asked, may God protect him, concerning the meaning intended by the staff of Moses, and its ability to part the sea and make springs flow from rocks, as well as concerning the meaning of the miracles of Jesus, and the meaning of the water that flowed from the prophet's fingertips, as is related in the traditions. Answer. May God grant you the joy of ascending to high stations and sublime goals. Know, illustrious scholar, that for all their exalted, lofty, and elevated station, the Holy Scriptures and prophetic sayings remain words, expressions, and designations. They therefore contain both literal, outward meanings and hidden, spiritual metaphors. In the same way, the hearts to which these words were revealed and the tongues that spoke these verses, though they were the thrones of divinity and the interpreters of heaven, remained human hearts and human tongues. To put the matter more clearly, there is no doubt that the prophets to whom the books were revealed were human beings like all other men, and spoke in the same way that other human beings speak. They expressed what was revealed to them in the same way that others expressed their own consciences. It is not rationally untenable that some of these expressions contain metaphors and figures of speech, metonymies and similes. In the same way, it is possible for them to contain plain statements, empty of allusion, and literal propositions, not subject to figurative interpretation. Many of the learned have taken the statements in the traditions literally and have thought that the staff actually turned into a serpent, and that water really flowed from the fingers of the Lord of Prophets, and have believed other amazing stories and miracles. On the other hand, a great many eminent scholars, who are knights in the arena of knowledge, have held that all such incidents reported in the holy books and traditions are figures of speech standing for rational matters and realities, which sound reason will accept and healthy discrimination does not reject. They have therefore interpreted the staff as God's command and decree. Moses, with this staff, defeated Pharaoh and his troops, and escaped the snares of pride and unbelief. With this staff, he struck the 12 tribes, so that their hardened hearts grew tender, their constricted breasts were soothed, and their darkened bosoms were illumined. From these hearts the waters of knowledge and wisdom flowed, and the springs of grace and mercy burst forth. The Israelites then became sovereign rulers and great leaders, whereas before they were ignorant shepherds and lowly slaves upon whom the pharaohs imposed the worst scourge, and to whom they gave to drink of the bitterest dreg. They had stolen their daughters for their service, killed their sons, and enslaved their men. In the course of these tribulations, and in suffering these adversities, the Israelites became like motionless rocks and lifeless bodies. They found no refuge from their ordeals, and no remedy for their maladies. Then Moses appeared, and God gave him the power of legislation and prophecy, and commanded him to deliver the children of Israel from the shame of their bondage and slavery. 2 splendid consequences, which no knowledgeable person will deny, nor any man of insight ignore, followed upon this command, which was spoken as a staff. And this mission, which was called the White Hand. First, all of Pharaoh's schemes and plots were undone. Second, Moses' people were redeemed from their broken condition, rescued from the degradation of captivity, and seated upon the throne of supreme authority. And so, from these hardened hearts, which were like barren rocks, the springs of knowledge and wisdom gushed forth. Their religion became known to all mankind, and over a period of 1,500 years, every tribe learned of their faith and their path. Then their dispensation expired, and their era reached its end. They grew disunited in their speech, Their ties were broken, their hearts grew hard and died, and the leprosy of degradation ate at their limbs and countenances. They went from the oppression of pharaohs to the tyranny of Caesars, from slavery to the Egyptians to bondage under the Romans. At that point, the sun of reality dawned from the horizon of God's world, and the melodies of the gospel rang out. God restored life to some among the people through the breath of Jesus. With his blessed hand he purified all the leprous faces and created the Christian religion. By this faith he cleansed all of Europe of the decay of idol worship. Then the years passed and the centuries followed one another, until the sun of guidance shone again from Arabia. The noble prophet arose to establish the Islamic faith, and God caused springs of knowledge and divine wisdom to flow from his blessed fingers. The branches of guidance put forth their foliage, came into flower, and then gave fruit in the kingdoms of the East. The East and the West were thus prepared to attain equilibrium, to achieve their perfection, and to witness the descent of the promised Lord from the clouds of glory. Thus, cycle revolved and ages expired, until day dawned again, and the light of lights shone forth. The gloom of darkest night was dispelled from all regions. The cause is God's, the one, the all-conquering. We Baha'is believe that the manifestations of the cause of God and the repositories of his revelation are, in reality, the manifestations of all his names and attributes, and the dawning places for his verses and sayings. Not a single one of God's attributes becomes manifest on this primary plane save from them, and it is impossible to establish any of the exalted characteristics of glory or beauty save by them. Moreover, reason cannot accept that we can ascribe to the essence of God any personal pronoun or any other illusion regarding the performance of any act, except if these refer to the manifestations. For the divine essence and the supreme reality is transcendent in its quintessence, exalted above description in its substance, and purified from attributes in its inmost being. Minds cannot discern it, nor can understanding attain to it. Consciousness cannot contain it, and the sense cannot encompass it. It cannot be described, named, or indicated. It cannot be specified by ascribing any pronoun to it. For the basis of all such ascription is sense perception, while it is beyond apprehension. It is clear that whatever is perceived is encompassed, and whatever is encompassed is limited, and whatever is limited has position, and this is an attribute of bodies and bodily things, above which all abstract things are exalted. How much more the divine essence, the illumined reality. All that whereby God's essence is described, and everything which is added to and rests upon God, including such attributes as glory, grandeur, power, might, knowledge, wisdom, will, volition, and so on, refer in reality to the manifestation of his cause, the dawning points of his light, the repositories of his revelation, and the fountainheads of his theophany. This matter has been inscribed upon the tablets of our most glorious Lord by the pen of the Most High, with detailed elucidations. And God has made manifest the essence of his mysteries in the scriptures that his sweet utterance has purified. Since it has been established that the manifestations of the cause of God are the manifestations of God's power, might, will, and volition, then it follows that it is not impossible for them to perform miracles, to cause things to appear which others find impossible, because of the universality of that holy soul which is effulgent in them. How could it be otherwise? They are mighty in their powers. They are the Spirit of God descended from heaven, and the reality exalted above all things, that subdues all beings and vanquishes all that are in the realms of the visible and the invisible. Just as things appear from human beings, which do not appear from other species of animals, owing to the universality of the human spirit in relation to the particularity of animal spirits. In the same way, the prophets can produce things others cannot, because of the universality of their spirit, the all-encompassing nature of their power, and the greatness of their might. In the same way, that the wondrous deeds and glorious works manifested by the human beings are miraculous for other species of animals, and indeed must be considered altogether impossible for the animals in relation to their own powers, so the prophets manifest things that are miraculous for other human beings. By the life of God, were those with penetrating insight to meditate upon the glad tidings and dire warnings proclaimed by the prophets and messengers concerning the cycles their people must pass through, their future progress, their halt, and then their decline, including prophecies of the period they would survive, specification of their allotted terms, and of what they would undergo as a result of their good and evil deeds. They would perceive the meaning of this Spirit's universality and the all-encompassing nature of its power, for the divine scriptures are the true heavenly repast. They contain whatever souls hunger for, that whereby breasts are gladdened, eyes are delighted, and hearts are overjoyed. Look, for instance, at the second epistle of the Apostle Peter, who is known among the Arabs as Simon the Pure. He was the first to believe in the Spirit of God, Jesus, who descended from the heavens and was his vice-regent over the servants after his ascension to the concourse on high. This chosen apostle, this preferred leader, foretold in this epistle the future condition of the Christian community and the events which would befall the Christian people. But human minds cannot perceive such things even with all their lofty scientific understanding, or with their precise political foresight, or even with their sublime yet merely human acumen. Rather, this is a matter of celestial revelation and divine inspiration, which we have referred to as the encompassing of the soul and the universality of the Holy Spirit. Were it not for lack of space and the fact that my mind is distracted by all the work I have to do and the opposition of base enemies, I would have given a commentary on this noble epistle for those with clear vision. Thus might they witness the wondrous marvels God has reposited in the book, for the understanding of which he has specialized those with acute minds. Likewise, the glorious Quran reports the future condition of the Islamic nation in meticulous detail, until the end comes with the promised theophany. It appoints the time of that theophany, its place of origin, and the way in which his cause will spread and his call will be promulgated. For instance, anyone who contemplates the holy verse, quote, "And listen thou for the day when the caller shall call from a near place. On the day they hear the cry in truth, that is the day of coming forth." End quote. We'll see that it specifies the place where the promised one will descend and predicts clearly that the call of the Lord will be raised from the Holy Land, which is the region nearest to Arabia. It is the western part of Greater Syria, which lies near Jabal al-Quds, on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea between Asia and Europe. This place is the snow-white Holy Land, the redolent illumined spot. It is the scene of the presence, the point of adoration for the pure ones, the homeland of the prophets, and the place from which the call of God is raised up between heaven and earth. It is well known that Syria and the coastlands of the Mediterranean are vast realms containing famous lands and numerous cities, villages, and farms. And the prophet himself explained that the promised one would appear in the city of Akka, and that the repository of that light would be the celebrated plain of those regions. He lauded and extolled that city and its environs, mentioned its springs and wells in his holy sayings. He foretold for its inhabitants and visitors the greatest good, saying, quote, "Blessed is he who hath seen Akka." End quote. This noble tradition became so widely known that specialists in language, like the author of the Siha and others, seized upon it and cited it in their books, so that it has become a proverb. Poets were so enamored of it that they used it in their poetry. Thus, in this tradition, and in many others like it, which are recorded in the books of traditions, the prophet set forth the details of all the blessed verses we mentioned above, elucidated them in the best possible manner, and firmly indicated where the theophany would take place. He spoke most clearly. The great ones among the learned have taken this tradition as a source for the details of their own prophecies, and have referred to it in their speeches, essays, books, and other works. These include the Prince of the Believers, Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was among the first believers, the great spiritual leader Ibn al-Arabi, Sheikh Kamaluddin Muhammad ibn Talha, Sayyid Ashrani, and many others in later times. Among the sayings Ashrani quoted from the exalted traditions in his book Sapphires and Jewels, in the 65th discussion, is the prophet saying, quote, "The most great battle, the banquet of God, shall be witnessed on the plain of Akka." End quote. Also cited in his saying concerning the ministers of the Promised One, quote, "They shall slay them all save one, who shall dwell upon the plain of Akka at the divine banquet, which God has made to be a table of feasting for beasts of prey, fowl, and vermin." End quote. There are many more such sayings that God has concealed in the hidden reaches of his knowledge and reposited in the inner depths of the Quran's verses. The revolution of days and the passing of ages have amply confirmed them. His mention will extend to the ends of the earth, and his fame will fill the seven heavens. Were those who reject everything beyond nature to be equitable, and were they to contemplate these abstruse matters, they would be forced to confess that human minds cannot perceive these matters in every detail and particular before their occurrence, nor can they inform the people of them before they come true. How can any knowledgeable and fair-minded person, given that this be the case, deny that from the holy reality, from the very dawning places of the universal, all-encompassing power, there might appear things that bewilder the reason, transcend the capacity of other souls, astonish the mind, and captivate the heart? Therefore, it does not behoove us to speak at length in discussing the appearance from them of special miracles. Rather, we must explain the essence of miracles themselves and their division into two categories: signs proposed to the prophets and revealed written signs, as well as the degree to which each of these types constitutes a proof. Do proposed signs constitute proof of the truth of the prophets? To what extent are these a necessary attribute for their being, a sign of the theophany, a proof of the truth of their call, or a support for their word? Or does this quality of proof not inhere in them, such that it is not a necessary quality for them to show forth? We shall discuss this complex issue and overcome the burden of its difficulties. Let us plunge into the deluge, and then we shall uncover its secrets. It is, by God, a stumbling block for the feet, and a hotly contested issue among the world's people. Through their ignorance, many an ancient civilization fell, and oblivion was irrevocably decreed for many a past era.